Hi, and welcome to the Aspire Europe Competent Program Controls course. This is the Leadership and Bias module. My name is Rod Sowden. I'm the lead author for P3M3 and Managing Successful Programs, and I'm also the Managing Director of Aspire Europe. I will be with you through all the videos, and I'll be trying to share some experiences that we've gained during our existence since 2004. Particularly in relation to working with organisations on improvement programmes. Now, the reason we've created this module on leadership and bias is because anyone out there that has ever been involved in implementing a PMO or implementing a change will know that this can only work with leadership support and commitment, and their behaviours are critical. So some things to think about. When I wrote P3M3, we had the job of defining behaviours, which was pretty complicated because how do we know what people are doing in the organisation they're in? And after a number of attempts, we realised that as you move up through the maturity levels, the nature of behaviours changes from the leaders. And so the way we evaluate it is at level 1, you've probably got lots of enthusiasm and you'll see some of the things listed on the slides coming through. Maybe they are results orientated, maybe they do want to shape the future, all that kind of stuff. And they get to level 2, and what we expecting from the program leader or the SRO or the sponsor, what do we expect from them in level 2? What happens with them there is they are committed to delivering effective controls until it becomes awkward for them in our experience. Yeah, when they have to work harder, they lose a bit of interest, which is a tad unfortunate for us who are trying to implement controls. And so what will happen is they'll stick to the rules until it becomes inconvenient, then they'll abandon the rules and just say, just do it, JDI. All right, so we tend to see a lack of commitment at level 2, which is why those organisations never get to level 3. If we look at some public sector organisations, their whole DNA is not built around compliance and control. So they have, if they've got autonomy built into the organisation, they don't necessarily like following rules. Those organisations that make it to level 3 tend to be those where they have some rules and procedures and people follow it. But most of all, what they've got is leaders who are committed to following it. Even if the staff don't want to follow it, they will say, that's the rules, we've got to keep going. Now, obviously, you don't keep going, it's something that's clearly going to fail. So they do know where the cutoff point is, but they will try to follow the process to the point where they know it doesn't work. Now, when they get to level 4, it's slightly different because the organisation will be mature enough to know that the processes need to be flexible. So we'll quite often find much more flexible processes which give the leaders more autonomy in the way that they do it. So that's how we apply leadership in the context of controls and design, which is where we are now. So if we look down some of the characteristics on the left, what we're really looking for is timely decision making, consistency of vocabulary, enabling high performance teams, and I would suggest you have a little look at that video as well, that they're energized to change. This polarity and exploration is interesting because what they're willing to do is explore opposition. Now, if we look at some of the case studies, things like Crossrail and that failure, there's clearly a failure of leadership in there. And there's nearly always a failure of leadership in all programs that fail, where they're not willing to listen to people who are maybe flagging up there's a problem. They're not willing to take on board that there's data saying they may not be a hero. Their pride starts to get in the way. And so therefore we need to have, that's why we need independent verification. But we've also seen increasingly independent assurance reviews not being willing to stand up and say this program is in serious trouble. Okay, and it's only really caused by quite often The leadership can actually persuade the independent review that it's okay, which is why data and metrics decision making is so important. Okay, so what we're looking at now is biases that can lead to mistakes, or in fact, almost certainly will. And again, I'm sure you can look around you and think about this now. Optimism bias, the systemic tendency to be over optimistic, seems to be a characteristic of the Western world, because when we've done maturity assessments in every country, they suffer from the same problem, and they kind of only go with the most optimistic of dates. And that's because the people who are doing the calculation want to please their leaders. Nobody wants to tell them the truth. That's why top-down planning is more popular than bottom-up planning. Then we've got to think about expectation or confirmation bias, yeah, where the tendency to see evidence that confirms existing beliefs. Now, if you're in the UK, and obviously we've been through Brexit, any fact that comes up at the moment can be twisted to confirm your bias towards pro-Brexit or anti-Brexit. Yeah, whatever argument comes up is very difficult to actually not challenge your own beliefs. And I can personally say, when we were looking at the Brexit vote, I kind of concluded that you couldn't actually make a decision based on data and listening. All you could do was go with your beliefs and assumptions when you made your decision. So what people are doing there is confirming what they think's good news. And then there's the planning fallacy. Yeah, our current initiatives will all be fine, even though every initiative's failed in the past. Just look at them, High Speed 2, Crossrail, all the other ones. They're just all making the same mistakes. And as somebody who's been at the heart of developing program management, it kind of nearly makes me cry seeing some of the stuff that's going on. But it's a fallacy. And I tell you what it's based on. It's based on pure arrogance. The fact somebody else got it wrong, and the belief that you'll get it right because you're a better human being. That's where it comes from. Because if you were to honestly review the data, you'd know that your estimates are overly optimistic and that you're being foolhardy, but you don't want to do that because you've already stuck your neck out. So availability bias, looking for information that easily comes to hand. Now, if you think about the effect of social media on people having their virus jabs, they'll go with what reads in front of them. Social media creates huge problems in there, in that they're making information available to support what you think. Now, if you, for example, were to look at a news channel that was maybe towards the right-hand side of politics, or maybe that's probably in the US, possibly in the UK, something like the Mail or whatever, that tends to go to the right-hand side of politics, you will find that easily available data to support a right-hand view of politics. Just like if you go to the Mirror, you'd see the left-hand side. So you will actually draw your biases from the data that's in front of you, but you're going to channels that already support your bias. Now, groupthink, now this one's massive, isn't it? Because groupthink is where program boards full of like-minded people get confused about what the truth is. So can you imagine how the program board of Crossrail was operating? They were all sat there thinking it was going to go live in 4 months' time, even though there was no trains working. What on earth was going on in the groupthink of like-minded people there? But I remember one of the ex-secretaries of state for health, when they were talking about COVID, did admit that all their contingency planning was based on a flu epidemic, not a COVID virus. And that's why we weren't ready for it in the UK. So they had groupthink, and it was really interesting that a senior politician admitted it. Framing, effect, and aversion. So this is where people put higher value on losses than on equivalent gains. Now that's why during our program, we worry much more about the cost of the program than actually the value of the benefits. All right. So if we had a more balanced view, we'd see that keeping the program budget at a certain level will deliver us more benefits. One of the massive problems that you see in why were benefits not delivered, it's because project teams in particular, but program teams as well, will hack back their scope to avoid doing the things that are kind of more difficult, which normally involves operational change, and therefore they complete the project on time and to budget, but delivering a much smaller scope, and that smaller scope means you don't get the benefits. So that's where they frame their decisions around their own terms of reference. Now, anchoring adjustments. Now, this one is really about fixating on the first estimate. And again, we can see it all over the place. We're based in Portishead, a little town outside Bristol. One of the top areas for putting in a new train line. In the 90s, a consultancy estimated that that train line was going to cost 10 million to open up. Those numbers were never verified, and when it actually came to do the proper evaluation, the cost came out at near 70 million. Everybody then claimed that the line had gone up 60 million. It had not gone up 60 million because it was never 10 million in the first place. It was just a loose estimate that had no reliable verification. And this is a massive problem for rail and roads. They put an initial price to government, Treasury nail it down, and that's it forever. And you can replicate that into numerous organisations, I'm sure. Biases affecting ability to handle probability. So this is where we draw overconfident conclusions from small samples. So we've seen this numerous times during COVID, haven't we? And I have to say, as we are coming to the end of the summer of 2021, I think we've got a lot better at this. But certainly back in the early days of COVID in the UK and in other countries, small samples were being used to justify all sorts of nonsense. So being able to actually have enough data to justify a decision, and we talked a lot about information, and we've got a video on that module. When you're designing the program, you need to be able to triangulate your data. And then this other one, causing confusion with correlation. So basically seeing something that's happened and blaming it on one thing when it's actually not the cause. All right, and a personally good example of that was back in September 2020 when the schools all went back and we had an outbreak of COVID again. I kind of assumed, or kind of in my own head thought, that's because the schools had gone back, but it turned out it was nothing to do with that, because the causation of that boom in COVID had come from a few months earlier, or not a few months, a few weeks earlier. So it's the same as looking at our projects and programs, yeah? Understanding why did a project run late? Was it because we had bad estimation, or did we just have a weak project manager? Yeah, the causation, was it bad planning? Who knows? But we need to check it out and not just assume that it was poor estimation or poor estimation, and that we haven't just got a very poor project manager working for us. Okay, I hope that gives you an idea. Now, these are the biases that are going to cause projects and programs to fail, and they are all around us, happening daily. So please go and have a look. Right, thanks for taking the time to listen to this particular video. I hope it's given you some insight into the importance of leadership. At the end of the day, if you don't have strong leadership and you can't counteract your biases, ultimately you cannot manage your program successfully and get effective controls. But most importantly, you need to know, because if you know what the problem is, maybe you can work around it. But this does need to be dealt with. Okay, well, time for a cup of coffee, and then time to get on with the course.